So let's talk about then the second type of flooding event when you have storm surge and the Hudson River overflowing its banks. Next. So the next 5 slides are a series of slides that show the progression of water moving. Here's Booker T. Washington. This is the Morris Canal. The Hudson River is right over here. These are the railroad tracks and the big arterial. So if you go to the next one, you can see the path that water is taking. Next. Next. So you can see that the path funnels between high ground along this corridor and basically pushes right to Booker T. Washington. Next. So that's why we get that big flooding problem there. Next. So again, what that happens in the year 2050 with sea level rise is while a lot of the occupied residential floors of Booker T. Washington were not flooded or were just barely flooded during Sandy, we think they will be flooded in 30 years from now. And you know, the orange buildings are definitely suffer the worst case. Next. So here you can see, as an aerial shot, here's the Morris Canal, the path of the water navigating between these yellow areas of high ground. So just backing up a little bit, there's 2 kind of big picture conceptual strategies to deal with it. You could put some sort of barrier around Booker T. Washington or next. We could put a barrier closer to the waterfront. And if we put a barrier closer to the waterfront between these areas of high ground, we not only protect Booker T. Washington, we protect a hospital, a power substation, light rail line, and a series of communities. So those are 2 big picture things that we've been looking at. I want to talk about the specific site solutions first. Next. So here's an aerial of Booker T. Washington. Next. And one strategy is to create a series of landscape berms or barriers around the perimeter to keep water from coming into the property. So we're going to show you a couple of ideas. And if we have 8.5 feet of floodwaters, we would have to create a berm that's 9 feet tall. Here's a person, and what that means is that inside the property, you're going to feel cut off from the outside and vice versa. And then also that compounds a series of security issues, of visibility within the property. So that's a big issue. And you know, you could say the same thing about if you put it, instead of doing a berm, you did a wall or whatever it is. So we thought, well, maybe you could do a lower level berm that's maybe 3 feet tall and then erect temporary emergency barriers in anticipation of a flood event when that event you know is coming. Next. These are images of those types of temporary walls. You know, this is a lower scale type of lightweight wall that could be erected on top of that lower berm, make it filled with water and keep the water out. You know, you can use these as floodgates, and you have passages between the berm. There are temporary floodgates that you can put up. If you ran the entire property with a flood barrier like this, though, it's millions of dollars. It's probably out of budget. Next. So another strategy that we looked at is, well, maybe you just let the floodwaters come in. Many of the buildings are high enough that they aren't going to get flooded. Some will. But what we could do is, remember, the floodwaters are there for maybe a few hours. Sandy, they were there less than 24 hours. But they needed to rescue some people. So we could create new landscape at a higher elevation that's above the floodwater levels. These become areas of rescue assistance, staging areas to provide food or to rescue people. They could be linked by elevated walkways that are brought out. They're stored in the basements and that are brought out during an emergency. And this will be done in combination with, we can improve the public space system. We could create community gardens, opportunities for active design, things that also work for the community full time, that they don't look like retrofits that deal with one solution. They deal with multiple things within public housing. And it would be done in concert with building renovations. Next. So typical building might get floodwaters of 2 to 4 feet. And there are a series of techniques that you can deal with that as long if it's not the entire floor that's being flooded. There are dry proofing techniques, both inside and outside, temporary shields that you could use. We could also think about repurposing the ground floors of those buildings, rather than being residential units, have them as some sort of public space. Again, it's not all of the buildings on this site that flood, it's a few of them, so that may be an opportunity. Next.